The moment Lydia Easton saw the official-looking paper nailed to her door, she knew her carefully built life was about to crumble like sun-baked adobe in a flash flood. She stood frozen on the porch of her modest boarding house in Skidoo, California, her worn skirts catching the hot desert wind that swept through the remote mining town in the scorching summer of 1907. The paper fluttered against the weathered wood, its black ink stark against the yellowed parchment. Her fingers trembled as she unpinned it and began to read the words that made her blood run cold. Notice of immediate eviction. By order of Section 47 of the California Territorial Property Act, all unmarried women operating commercial establishments within town limits must vacate premises within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in seizure of property and arrest. Lydia read it 3 times, her heart hammering harder with each pass. She had lived in Skidoo for 5 years, ever since her father died and left her the boarding house. She had scraped and saved, worked her fingers raw, keeping the place running, providing clean beds and decent meals to the miners and travelers who passed through this desolate corner of the Panamint Range. And now someone was telling her she had to leave because she was an unmarried woman? Her mind raced through everything she knew about California law. She had studied every regulation when she took over the business, making sure she was operating legally. There was no Section 47. There was no Territorial Property Act. California had been a state for over 50 years, for heaven's sake. Someone was lying, and she had a sinking suspicion who it was. Marcus Henley, the banker who had been pressuring her to sell for the past year, ever since silver deposits were discovered in the hills behind her property. He wanted her land, and apparently he had decided to simply take it. Lydia crumpled the paper in her fist, fury rising hot in her chest. She was not going to let some greedy banker steal everything she had worked for. But as she looked down the dusty main street of Skidoo, at the handful of weathered buildings clinging to the mountainside, she felt a wave of helplessness. Who would help her? The town marshal was Henley's cousin. The mayor owed the bank money. She was alone in this fight. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A rider was coming up the road, leading a pack horse laden with supplies. Even from a distance, she could see he sat tall in the saddle, his posture speaking of confidence and capability. As he drew closer, she found herself staring despite her troubles. He was younger than most of the grizzled prospectors who frequented her establishment, probably in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble, and eyes that were a striking shade of gray-blue beneath the brim of his dusty hat. He reined his horse to a stop in front of her boarding house, those keen eyes taking in the building with an appraising look. This the Easton boarding house? His voice was deep and measured, with a slight drawl that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "It is," Lydia said, trying to compose herself and hide the crumpled eviction notice behind her back. "Are you looking for a room? If you have one available." He dismounted with easy grace and removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that needed a trim. "Name's Lucas Ortega. I will be in town for a while on business." Lydia studied him more carefully now. He was not dressed like a miner. His clothes were dusty from travel but well made, and he wore a gun belt with the comfortable familiarity of a man who knew how to use it. But there was something else about him, an air of education and refinement that sat oddly with his rugged appearance. "I have rooms," she said, then hesitated, "though I cannot guarantee how long I will be able to keep them available." Lucas's eyes sharpened with interest. "That sounds like there is a story behind it." Before she could answer, a voice called out from down the street, Miss Easton, I need to speak with you." Lydia turned to see Albert Green, the town clerk, hurrying toward her. He was a nervous man in his 50s, perpetually worried about something. Today he looked particularly agitated. "Miss Easton," he said breathlessly as he reached her porch, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about the notice. I tried to tell them it was not right, but Mr. Henley insisted I post it, and he said the marshal would arrest me if I refused." "What notice?" Lucas asked quietly. Lydia reluctantly produced the crumpled paper. Apparently, someone has invented a law that says I have to leave my own property because I am an unmarried woman. Lucas took the paper from her and read it carefully, his expression growing darker with each line. When he looked up, there was steel in his eyes. This is completely fraudulent. I know that, Lydia said, but knowing it and proving it are two different things. Actually, they are not. Lucas reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather portfolio. From it, he extracted a small card that he handed to Lydia. I think I can help you with this. Lydia looked at the card in confusion. Lucas Ortega, attorney at law, San Francisco, California, licensed to practice before the United States Circuit Court. Her eyes widened as she looked up at him. You are a lawyer? I am. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that there is no Section 47 of any California Territorial Property Act because California has not been a territory since 1850. This document is not just wrong, it is fraudulent, and whoever created it has committed a serious crime. Albert Green went pale. Mr. Henley wrote it himself? I saw him. He said it was a real law and that he was just enforcing it for the good of the town. Did he now? Lucas's voice was soft but dangerous. That is very interesting. Mr. Green, I would like you to make a statement to that effect in writing if you would be willing. The clerk nodded eagerly. Yes. Sir, I never felt right about it anyway. Miss Easton has been nothing but good to this town. Excellent. Miss Easton, I would very much like to rent a room from you, and I would also like to offer you my services as legal counsel. I came to Skidoo to handle some mining claims, but this situation takes precedence. No one should be forced from their home based on manufactured laws. Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. She had been so alone in this fight, and now here was this stranger offering to help her. I cannot afford to pay a San Francisco lawyer, Mr. Ortega. Call me Lucas, please, and we can discuss payment later. Right now, I want to know everything about Marcus Henley and why he wants your property so badly. She led him inside into the cool dimness of the boarding house. The main room was simple but spotlessly clean, with a long table for meals and comfortable chairs arranged near the fireplace. The walls were whitewashed adobe, and bright curtains at the windows added cheerful color. It was clear that Lydia took pride in her establishment. Would you like coffee? She asked. And I should show you to your room. Coffee would be wonderful, thank you. But first, tell me about Henley. Lydia busied herself with the coffee pot, grateful for something to do with her hands. He showed up in Skidoo about 18 months ago and bought the bank from the previous owner. At first, everything seemed fine. But then prospectors started finding silver in the mountains behind the town, and suddenly Henley became very interested in buying up land. My property sits right at the base of the richest veins. And when you refuse to sell? He started making things difficult. He called in loans to my suppliers. He spread rumors that my boarding house was not respectable. A few weeks ago, he offered me half what the property is worth and said it was his final offer. I told him I was not interested at any price. This is my home, not just my business. My father built this house with his own hands. Lucas accepted the cup of coffee she handed him, their fingers brushing briefly. Lydia felt an unexpected spark at the contact and pulled her hand back quickly. She was not some schoolgirl to be flustered by a handsome stranger, no matter how conveniently he had arrived. How many boarders do you have currently? Lucas asked. 3, besides yourself now. 2 miners and a supply merchant who comes through regularly. They are all honest men who pay their rent on time. Good. I want you to gather them this evening and explain the situation. The more witnesses we have to what Henley is trying to do, the stronger our case will be. In the meantime, I'm going to pay a visit to the bank and let Mr. Henley know that you now have legal representation. He will not like that, Lydia warned. Lucas smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something almost breathtaking. I am counting on it. Men like Henley make mistakes when they are angry, and I intend to document every single one. After Lucas left for the bank, Lydia found herself unable to concentrate on her usual afternoon tasks. She moved through the boarding house in a daze, dusting furniture that was already clean, rearranging kitchen supplies that did not need rearranging. Her mind kept returning to the tall lawyer with the gray-blue eyes who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not quite known how to form. She was setting the table for supper when Lucas returned, and she knew immediately from his expression that the meeting with Henley had not been pleasant. "Let me guess," she said. "He was not happy to learn I have a lawyer." "That is putting it mildly." Lucas removed his hat and hung it on the peg by the door with the ease of someone who already felt at home. "He threatened to have me run out of town. When I pointed out that attempting to do so would add to his legal troubles, he threatened to have the marshal arrest you immediately for trespassing on bank property." Lydia's hands stilled on the silverware she was arranging. "Bank property? This house has been in my family for 15 years. I know. I asked to see the deed showing the bank's ownership. Oddly enough, he could not produce one. He claimed it was filed with the county recorder in Independence, but that he had the right to evict you based on unpaid debts. I do not owe the bank anything. I paid off my father's loan 3 years ago. Do you have documentation of that?" "Of course. I keep all my papers in my father's old desk upstairs. I will need to see them. Henley is building a case out of lies, but lies can be convincing if they are documented, and the truth is not. We need to have proof of every single claim you make." They spent the next hour going through her father's meticulously kept records. Lydia had continued his habit of documenting everything, and she was able to produce receipts, paid loan documents, property deeds, and business licenses going back years. Lucas studied each paper carefully, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound journal. "Your father was a thorough man." "He had to be. When he first came to California during the gold rush, he saw too many people lose everything because they had not kept proper records. He taught me to do the same. It may well save your property now." Lucas looked up from the papers, and Lydia was struck again by the intelligence in his eyes. "With this documentation, I can file an injunction blocking any eviction attempt. I will need to ride to Independence to file it with the county court, which means I will be gone for a few days. Will you be all right here alone?" The thought of him leaving made Lydia's chest tighten with anxiety, which was ridiculous. She had been handling things on her own for years. But having Lucas here, having someone on her side, had made her feel safer than she had realized. "I will be fine," she said, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. "The boarders you wanted me to talk to will be here, and Henley would not do anything too outrageous while witnesses are present. I hope you're right." Lucas hesitated, then reached out and gently touched her hand where it rested on the desk. "I know we only just met, Lydia, but I want you to know I'm going to do everything in my power to protect your home and your rights. What Henley is doing is not just illegal, it is unconscionable." The warmth of his hand on hers sent awareness skittering up her arm. She looked at their joined hands, at his strong fingers covering hers, and felt something shift inside her chest. When she looked up and met his eyes, she saw her own awareness reflected back at her. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do you care so much? You do not know me. This is not your fight." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his thumb unconsciously stroking the back of her hand. "My mother was widowed when I was 10 years old. She tried to run my father's ranch in Texas, but the neighboring landowner wanted the property. He used every legal and illegal trick he could think of to force her off the land. She fought for 3 years, but in the end she lost everything because she did not have anyone with legal knowledge to help her defend her rights." "I am sorry," Lydia said. "That must have been terrible for you both." "It was. It was also why I decided to become a lawyer. I watched my mother, a capable, intelligent woman, be ground down by a system that was designed to benefit men with power and money. I swore I would never stand by and watch that happen to someone else if I could help it." He squeezed her hand gently. "So yes, this is absolutely my fight." The intensity in his voice, the conviction in his eyes, made Lydia's breath catch. She had known this man for only a few hours, but she felt she could trust him in a way she had not trusted anyone in years. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not need to thank me. I am just doing what is right." But he did not immediately release her hand, and neither did she pull away. They stood there in the quiet office, surrounded by papers and fading afternoon light, connected by more than just their joined hands. The sound of the front door opening broke the moment. They stepped apart quickly as heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. "Miss Easton, you here?" The voice belonged to Tom Murphy, one of her regular boarders, a grizzled Irish miner with a heart of gold beneath his rough exterior. "In the office, Tom," Lydia called, trying to compose herself. Her hand still tingled where Lucas had touched it. Tom appeared in the doorway, followed by the other two boarders, Jack Chen, a quiet Chinese prospector, and Henry Walker, the supply merchant. All three men looked concerned. "We heard about the eviction notice," Tom said without preamble. "It is all over town. Henley is telling everyone you are being thrown out for running an improper establishment." Rage flooded through Lydia. "He is saying what?" "It is a lie, of course," Henry said quickly. "Everyone who has stayed here knows this is the most respectable boarding house in the territory, but Henley has people who will back up whatever he says." Lucas stepped forward, his expression grim. "Gentlemen, my name is Lucas Ortega, and I am Miss Easton's attorney. I want you to know that the eviction notice is based on completely fabricated legal statutes. There is no law requiring unmarried women to vacate commercial properties. Mr. Henley has committed fraud, and I intend to see that he faces consequences for it." The three men looked at Lucas with new respect. "A lawyer," Tom said with satisfaction. "Now that is what we need. What can we do to help?" "I need you to be willing to testify about Miss Easton's character and the quality of her establishment. I also need you to document any interactions you have with Henley or anyone working for him. If they try to intimidate you or offer you money to say things against Miss Easton, I need to know about it immediately." All three men nodded firmly. "Miss Lydia has treated us better than we deserve," Jack said quietly. It was the most Lydia had ever heard him say at once. "We will help however we can." As the men dispersed to clean up for supper, Lucas turned back to Lydia. "You have good people here. That will work in your favor." "They are more than boarders," Lydia said. "Además, they are friends. Tom was the first person to rent a room for me after my father died. He could have gone anywhere, but he stayed because he said he could not let me run the place alone. Jack arrived a year later, and he barely spoke English then. I helped him learn, and he has been here ever since. And Henry has been routing his supply runs through Skidoo for 3 years, even though it adds a day to his journey." "You have built something important here," Lucas said, "a community. That is worth fighting for." Supper that evening was a lively affair. Lucas fit in easily with the other boarders, discussing mining prospects with Tom and Jack, and trading stories about the territorial roads with Henry. Lydia watched from her place at the head of the table, serving food and coffee, and found herself studying Lucas when she thought he was not looking. He was handsome, certainly, but it was more than that. He had an air of quiet competence, a way of listening intently when others spoke, of making everyone at the table feel heard and valued. And when he laughed at one of Tom's outrageous stories, his whole face lit up in a way that made Lydia's heart skip a beat. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. Letting herself develop feelings for Lucas would be foolish. He was here on business, and once he had resolved her legal troubles, he would return to San Francisco and his life there. She was being silly, reading too much into his kindness and his determination to help her. But when the meal was over and the boarders had retired to their rooms, Lucas lingered to help her clear the table. They worked in comfortable silence, and Lydia found herself acutely aware of his presence, of the way his shoulder brushed hers as they moved around the small kitchen, of the sound of his breathing in the quiet room. "You do not have to help," she said. "You are a paying guest." "I was raised to clean up after myself," Lucas replied. "My mother would box my ears if she knew I sat idle while someone else did the work." He paused, a dish towel in his hands. "Besides, I like spending time with you." The simple honesty of the statement made Lydia's cheeks flush. "You barely know me." "I know you are brave. I know you are hardworking. I know you inspire loyalty in the people around you." He set down the towel and turned to face her fully. "And I know that when you get angry, your eyes flash like green fire, which is quite possibly the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Lydia's breath caught. Lucas, I am sorry, he said quickly. That was inappropriate. You hired me as your lawyer, and I should not be saying such things. I did not hire you, Lydia pointed out, trying to steady her racing heart. You offered your services, and I do not think I mind you saying such things, even though I probably should. Lucas took a step closer. They were standing very near each other now, close enough that Lydia could see the silver flecks in his gray-blue eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cool evening air. I should be professional, Lucas said, but he did not step back. I should maintain appropriate boundaries. You should, Lydia agreed, but she did not step back either. I came to Skidoo to handle some mining claims and then leave. I was not expecting to meet someone like you. Someone like me? Someone who makes me forget about being professional, someone who makes me want to stay. His hand came up slowly, giving her plenty of time to move away, and gently cupped her cheek. His palm was warm against her skin, slightly calloused from years of riding and outdoor work. Tell me to stop, Lydia. Tell me this is just business, and I will step back and be nothing but your lawyer. Lydia knew she should do exactly that. She should be sensible and practical. The way she had been for the past 5 years, ever since her father's death, had forced her to become the sole support of her household. She should not risk complicating her legal situation with personal feelings. But when she looked into Lucas's eyes, she saw more than just attraction. She saw respect and admiration. She saw someone who understood her struggles because he had watched his own mother face similar battles. She saw someone who believed in fighting for what was right, even when it was difficult. What if I do not want you to stop? She whispered. Lucas's eyes darkened. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, and when his lips finally met hers, it was with a gentleness that made her heart ache. The kiss was soft and sweet, a question rather than a demand, and Lydia found herself answering it by leaning into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heartbeat under her palms, as rapid as her own. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I should not have done that, Lucas said, but he did not sound sorry. Probably not, Lydia agreed, but she was smiling. It will not affect how I handle your case. I promise you that. Your legal troubles will be resolved regardless of anything personal between us. I know. And oddly enough, she did know that. Lucas was not the kind of man to let personal feelings interfere with doing what was right. But I want you to know, Lydia Easton, that when this is over, when your property is secure and Henley has been dealt with, I would very much like the chance to court you properly. Lydia's smile widened. I would like that too. He kissed her once more, quick and hard, as if sealing a promise. Then he stepped back, putting proper distance between them. I should get some sleep. I want to leave for Independence at first light, and it is a long ride. The eastern room is yours. It has the best bed and catches the morning sun. Thank you. He paused at the doorway. Lock the doors tonight, Lydia, and if anyone tries to give you trouble, fire a shot. Tom strikes me as the kind of man who would come running. Tom sleeps with a shotgun next to his bed, Lydia confirmed. I will be fine. But after Lucas had gone upstairs and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Lydia found herself checking the locks twice and peering out the windows at the dark street. Skidoo was not a large town, just a few dozen buildings clinging to the side of a mountain in the middle of the desert. But tonight it felt different, threatening in a way it never had before. She thought about Marcus Henley in his fancy banker's office plotting to steal her home. She thought about the fake eviction notice and the lies he was spreading about her reputation. And she thought about Lucas, already putting himself at risk to defend her against a man who clearly had no scruples. Sleep was a long time coming that night. Lucas rode out at dawn, his saddlebags packed with carefully documented evidence and legal briefs he had worked on by lamplight into the early hours. Lydia stood on the porch to see him off, very aware of her boarders watching from the windows with knowing smiles. 3 days, Lucas said as he checked his horse's cinch. 4 at most. Can you manage that long? I have managed 5 years on my own, Lydia reminded him. I think I can handle a few more days. I know you can, but I do not like leaving you here with Henley circling like a vulture. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace. In the early morning light, with his hat pulled low and his jaw set with determination, he looked every inch the frontier lawman, though his weapons were legal briefs rather than 6-shooters. Be careful on the road, Lydia said, and Lucas, thank you for everything. He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. His eyes warmed despite the serious set of his mouth. Then he wheeled his horse and headed down the mountain road toward the valley below, leading his pack horse behind him. Lydia watched until he disappeared from view, then turned to face her day. She had boarders to feed, rooms to clean, and accounts to manage. Keeping busy would help the time pass more quickly. But Marcus Henley had other plans. He arrived at noon with 3 men Lydia did not recognize, all of them armed and looking like the kind of hired muscle found in saloons and gambling dens rather than legitimate establishments. The banker himself was dressed in an expensive suit that looked absurd in the dusty heat of Skidoo, his round face already red from the sun. Miss Easton, he said with false politeness as she answered his knock, I am here to conduct an inspection of the premises. By whose authority? Lydia asked, blocking the doorway. By the authority of the bank which holds a lien on this property due to unpaid debts. That is a lie, and you know it. My father's loan was paid in full 3 years ago. Henley produced a document from his jacket. According to my records, there were substantial late fees and penalties that were never addressed. The total now amounts to nearly $2,000. Show me the original loan documents. Show me the payment schedule. Show me any legitimate proof that I owe you a single penny. Henley's face grew redder. Are you calling me a liar? I am calling you a fraud. And my lawyer is filing papers with the county court right now that will expose every illegal thing you have done. Your lawyer? Henley's laugh was ugly. You mean that Mexican drifter who's probably halfway to Mexico by now with whatever money you were foolish enough to give him? Lydia felt her temper flare. Lucas Ortega is a licensed attorney with the California bar, and he is Spanish, not Mexican. Not that his heritage matters in the slightest. What matters is that he has proof you fabricated the eviction notice and that you are attempting to defraud me of my legal property. We will see what the court says about that, Henley gestured to his men. Search the building. I want an inventory of everything on the premises. You are not coming into my house without a legitimate warrant signed by a judge. One of Henley's men moved forward, his hand on his gun. The man gave you an order, lady. And I am telling you to get off my property. Lydia did not move from the doorway. Let me make this simple for you, Miss Easton. Henley's voice dropped, losing its pretense of civility. You can leave now with whatever you can carry, and I will give you $500 for your trouble, or you can keep fighting, and I will make sure you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. I have the marshal, the mayor, and half the businessmen in this town in my pocket. You have no one. She has me. Tom Murphy appeared behind Lydia, his shotgun cradled casually in his arms. And me, said Jack Chen, stepping into view with a rifle. Henry Walker emerged from the side of the house, also armed. And me. Henley's face went from red to purple. You men are making a serious mistake. I can make sure none of you ever work in this territory again. I have been working in these mountains for 20 years, Tom said calmly, long before you showed up, and I will be here long after you are gone. Now I suggest you and your hired dogs get off Miss Lydia's property before someone gets hurt. For a long, tense moment, the two groups faced each other. Lydia held her breath, terrified that violence was about to erupt on her front porch. But Henley was a coward at heart, and he was not willing to risk his own skin in a gunfight. This is not over, he snarled at Lydia, not by a long shot. You have 3 weeks left on that eviction notice, and when the time is up, I will have the marshal throw you out in the street. We will see about that, Lydia said with more confidence than she felt. Henley and his men retreated, but the banker turned back at the edge of the property. One more thing, Miss Easton. I have sent word to Independence about your lawyer. Seems there are some questions about whether he is actually licensed to practice in California. Would be a shame if he turned out to be just another con man, would it not? The threat hung in the air as Henley climbed into his carriage and drove away. Lydia sagged against the door frame, her knees suddenly weak. "Are you all right, Miss Lydia?" Tom asked gently. "I'm fine, thank you, all of you. If you had not been here—" "We are here," Jack said firmly, "and we will keep being here. Henley does not scare us." But he scared Lydia. Not physically, perhaps, but the scope of his corruption, the way he seemed to have his fingers in every aspect of Skidoo's governance, was deeply frightening. And now he was going after Lucas, trying to undermine his credentials and credibility. She prayed Lucas would be safe on the road and successful in independence, because if he failed, she was going to lose everything. The next 3 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lydia threw herself into work, cleaning rooms that were already spotless, cooking elaborate meals that no one had requested. Anything to keep her mind occupied and stop herself from imagining all the terrible things that might have happened to Lucas. What if Henley had sent men after him? What if they had ambushed him on the lonely mountain road? What if he was lying hurt somewhere, and she would never know? She was kneading bread dough with perhaps more violence than necessary on the third afternoon when Tom burst into the kitchen. "Ryder coming," he announced. "It is your lawyer." Lydia abandoned the dough and ran to the front porch, not caring that she was covered in flour. Lucas was indeed riding up the street, looking dusty and exhausted, but blessedly whole. When he saw her, his face broke into a tired smile. He dismounted and climbed the steps, and Lydia had to restrain herself from throwing her arms around him in front of half the town. "Did you get it?" she asked urgently. "The injunction?" "I got it." He pulled a folded document from his jacket. Judge Morrison was very interested in Mr. Henley's creative legal writing. He issued an immediate injunction blocking any eviction and ordered Henley to appear before the court to explain the fraudulent notice. There is also a warrant for his arrest if he fails to comply. Lydia felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. "You did it! You actually did it!" "We are not finished yet, but this buys us time and puts Henley on the defensive." Lucas swayed slightly on his feet, and Lydia noticed how exhausted he looked. "You need food and rest. Come inside." She led him to the kitchen and sat him down at the table, then quickly prepared a plate of cold roast beef, bread, and cheese. And he ate like a man starving, and she realized he probably had not had a decent meal since leaving 3 days earlier. "Tell me everything," she said, sitting across from him with coffee. "Did Henley's people try to stop you?" "They tried. I was followed for the first day, but I know how to lose a tail. Once I got to Independence, I went straight to the courthouse and filed the injunction request. Judge Morrison is an honest man, thank God. Some of the other judges in this territory are as corrupt as Henley." He took a long drink of coffee. The judge was also very interested when I showed him Albert Green's written statement about Henley creating the fake eviction notice. He has asked the territorial attorney general to investigate Henley's banking practices as well. "So what happens now?" "Now Henley has to respond to the injunction within 10 days. He will have to appear in court and defend his actions, and he will have to produce legal proof of any claims he has made against you. Since no such proof exists, he is going to have a very difficult time. The judge also issued a restraining order preventing Henley from approaching you or your property." "He is not going to accept this quietly," Lydia warned. "No, he is not. Which is why I stopped in Independence and hired 2 men to serve as guards for your property. They should arrive tomorrow." At Lydia's expression, he held up a hand. "Before you argue about the expense, you should know they are friends of mine from San Francisco, and they owed me a favor. This is not costing you anything." "You seem to have thought of everything." "I try." Lucas rubbed his eyes tiredly. "Though I confess I have been thinking about more than just legal strategy." "Oh?" Lydia's heart began to beat faster. "I have been thinking about you, about that kiss in your kitchen. About whether you have had time to reconsider and decide that getting involved with your lawyer is a terrible idea." Lydia reached across the table and took his hand. I have had plenty of time to think, and I have not changed my mind, have you? Not for a moment. He turned his hand to lace his fingers through hers. Though I should warn you, I'm not always going to be easy to be with. My work takes me all over the territory, sometimes for weeks at a time. I have enemies who would like to see me fail, and my family in Texas was not happy when I chose law over ranching, so that relationship is complicated. My father was a gold prospector who dragged me all over California before we finally settled here. I have run a boarding house by myself for 5 years. I'm facing down a corrupt banker who wants to steal my land. I think I can handle a little complexity. Lucas laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I suppose you can at that. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. I missed you, Lydia. 3 days should not be long enough to miss someone this much, but I did. I missed you too, she admitted, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. I was worried something had happened to you. I am not that easy to get rid of. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, though I will admit there were a couple of moments on the road when I was worried I might not make it back. She pulled back to look at him in alarm. What happened? Henley's men caught up with me on the second day. There were 4 of them, and they made it clear I should turn around and forget about filing anything with the court. When I refused, they decided to try convincing me more forcefully. Lydia noticed for the first time the bruise along his jaw, partially hidden by stubble, and what looked like scraped knuckles on his right hand. You fought them? I did not have much choice. They were not planning to let me ride away. He saw her expression and added quickly, I am fine, Lydia, truly. And they got the worst of it. I was a bare-knuckle boxer in college, which scandalized my mother but turned out to be rather useful. You could have been killed, but I was not. And now Henley is in serious legal trouble, and you are protected by a court order. He cupped her face in his hands. It was worth the risk. Lydia felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she had built around her heart after years of being alone and self-sufficient. She had been taking care of herself for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care for her, to have someone willing to fight for her. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. Lucas went very still. That is a dangerous thing to say to a man who has been fantasizing about you for 3 days straight. Is it? Why? Because it makes me want to do this. He kissed her, deep and thorough, no longer the gentle questioning of their first kiss, but a claiming, a promise. Lydia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and kissed him back with all the fear and relief and joy surging through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I am falling in love with you too, Lydia Easton. I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I cannot help how I feel. Then do not. She kissed him again, softer this time. Do not help it. Just feel it, and we will figure out the rest as we go. The sound of someone clearing their throat made them spring apart. Tom stood in the doorway, grinning broadly. Sorry to interrupt, but Henry just rode in with news. Henley is at the saloon drinking heavily and telling everyone who will listen that he's going to burn this place to the ground if you do not leave voluntarily. Lucas's expression turned to stone. He is making terroristic threats in public? The man really is an idiot. Or desperate, Lydia said. A desperate man is dangerous. Which is why I'm going to pay Mr. Henley a visit and remind him that he is now under a restraining order and that any approach to you or your property will result in his immediate arrest. Lucas picked up his hat. Tom, would you and the other men be willing to come with me as witnesses? Happily, Tom said with a grin. Lydia grabbed Lucas's arm. Be careful, please. He covered her hand with his, always. But she could not shake the feeling of dread as she watched Lucas ride down to the saloon with Tom, Jack, and Henry following behind. Men like Henley did not give up easily, and when cornered, they tended to lash out in unpredictable ways. She busied herself with finishing the bread, trying not to watch the clock, but when an hour had passed with no sign of Lucas returning, her anxiety grew. Finally, she could not stand it any longer. She grabbed a shawl and headed down the street toward the saloon. She could hear raised voices before she even reached the building. A small crowd had gathered outside, and through the open door she could see Lucas facing off against Henley in the middle of the saloon. "You have no authority here," Henley was shouting, his face red and his words slurred. "This is my town. I own the bank. I own the businesses. I own the people. You are just some Mexican lawyer who thinks he can come in here and, Spanish?" Lucas corrected coldly. "My family has been in California since before it was even part of the United States. And I have all the authority I need, Mr. Henley. It is called the law. And it applies to everyone, even corrupt bankers who think they are above it." Henley lunged at Lucas, but he was drunk and slow. Lucas sidestepped easily, and Henley crashed into a table. He came up with a gun in his hand. Lydia screamed. The crowd scattered. Lucas held up his hands, his expression calm despite the weapon pointed at his chest. "Put the gun down, Henley. You are drunk, and you are making this worse for yourself." "Worse? How can it be worse? You have ruined everything. That land was supposed to be mine. The silver was supposed to be mine." Henley was nearly crying now, spittle flying from his lips. "I borrowed money from men in San Francisco, men you do not cross. I promised them returns on their investment. If I do not deliver, they will kill me. Do you understand? They will kill me." "Then you should not have made promises based on property you did not own," Lucas said. "Put down the gun and we can talk about this." "There is nothing to talk about. If I cannot have that land, no one can." Henley swung the gun toward the door, toward Lydia. "Maybe if I kill her, you will stop being such a damn hero." Lucas moved faster than Lydia would have thought possible. He was on Henley before the banker could fire, knocking the gun upward. The shot went wild, shattering a window. The two men struggled, and then Tom was there, wrenching the gun away while Jack and Henry pinned Henley's arms. The marshal finally appeared, looking unhappy and nervous. "What is going on here?" "Mr. Henley just attempted to murder Miss Easton in front of a dozen witnesses," Lucas said coldly. "I believe that warrants an arrest, do you not?" The marshal looked at the crowd, at Henley sobbing and struggling in Jack and Henry's grip, and at the gun in Tom's hand. He had no choice but to comply. "Marcus Henley, you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and terroristic threats." He produced handcuffs and secured Henley's wrists. "Anything you say can be used against you in court." As they led Henley away, Lucas turned to scan the crowd, his eyes finding Lydia immediately. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, not caring who was watching. "Are you all right?" he demanded. "I am fine. He did not hurt me." But she was shaking, and Lucas held her tighter. "He could have killed you if that bullet had been a few inches to the left." He cut himself off, his arms tightening around her. "I cannot lose you, Lydia. Not now that I have found you. You are not going to lose me." She pulled back enough to look at him. "But Lucas, you heard what he said. About men in San Francisco, men who do not cross. What if they come after you? After me? Then we will deal with them together." He cupped her face gently. "I am not going anywhere, Lydia, not unless you want me to." "I do not want you to. I want you to stay." The words came out before she could stop them, but she did not regret them. "I want you to stay in Skidoo, with me." Lucas's eyes darkened with emotion. "Are you sure? Because once I say yes to that, once I commit to building a life here with you, I'm all in. I do not do anything halfway." "I am sure." And she was. Despite the chaos, despite the danger, despite the fact that they had known each other for less than a week, she was absolutely certain. "Stay with me, Lucas. Please." He kissed her then long and deep, in the middle of the street with half of Skidoo watching. And Lydia kissed him back, pouring all her hope and fear and love into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, Tom was grinning at them. "About damn time," he said. "Now can we go home? I need a drink after all that excitement, and Miss Lydia makes better coffee than the saloon anyway." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and preparations. Lucas made 2 more trips to Independence, each time returning with better news. Henley's banking licenses had been revoked. His assets had been frozen pending investigation into his business practices. The men he had borrowed money from in San Francisco had been identified as associates of a criminal organization, which brought in federal authorities. The U.S. Marshal's office is taking over the case, Lucas explained over dinner one evening. Henley was not just defrauding you, Lydia. He had been running similar schemes all over the territory, targeting widows and unmarried women specifically because they had fewer legal protections. How many women did he hurt? Lydia asked, horrified. At least 24 that we know of so far. Some lost their homes. Some lost their businesses. One woman lost everything and ended up destitute. Lucas's jaw tightened. But they are all going to get justice now. The federal prosecutor wants them all to testify at Henley's trial. Will I have to testify? Probably. Is that going to be a problem? Lydia thought about it, about standing up in court and facing down the man who had tried to destroy her life, about speaking for all the other women he had victimized. No, she said firmly. I want to testify. I want him to face what he has done. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. You are the bravest woman I have ever met. I am not brave. I am just tired of being afraid. That is what bravery is, Lydia. Doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid. The trial was held in early autumn, when the brutal heat of the desert summer had finally broken. Lydia traveled to Independence with Lucas, staying in a hotel that seemed impossibly luxurious after years of living in a rustic boarding house. She was nervous about testifying, but when her turn came, she looked directly at Marcus Henley and told the court exactly what he had done. She described the fake eviction notice, the lies about her debts, the threats, and finally the attempt on her life. Her voice never wavered, and when she was finished, several of the jury members were nodding in approval. Other women testified as well, each telling similar stories of manipulation and fraud. By the time the prosecution rested its case, Henley looked like a broken man. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found him guilty on all counts, and the judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. It is over, Lucas said as they left the courthouse. He can never hurt you or anyone else again. Lydia felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had not even realized she was carrying. It is really over. Well, not quite. Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing on the courthouse steps, the autumn sun warm on their faces. There is one more piece of business we need to resolve. What business? Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lydia's heart began to pound. Lydia Easton, I know we have not known each other very long. I know we met under the worst possible circumstances, but I also know that I love you with everything in me. You are strong and brave and kind, and you make me want to be a better man. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. Will you marry me? Lydia looked at the ring, then at Lucas's face, at the hope and love shining in his gray-blue eyes. She thought about how he had ridden into her life at exactly the moment she needed him most, how he had fought for her when no one else would, how he had shown her that it was possible to trust again, to love again. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around on the courthouse steps while a few startled lawyers and clerks watched in amusement. They were married a month later in Skidoo, in a simple ceremony attended by everyone in town. Tom gave Lydia away, Jack played violin, and Henry provided the wedding feast. The new marshal, an honest man appointed after Henley's arrest, officiated. Lydia wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and carried wildflowers from the desert hills. Lucas wore a new suit, but he still looked most comfortable in his work clothes and boots. When he said his vows, his voice was strong and sure, and when he kissed his bride, the whole town cheered. They spent their wedding night in the best room of the boarding house, which Lydia had prepared with new linens and wildflowers. Lucas was gentle and patient, and Lydia discovered that being married to him was even better than she had imagined. "I love you," he whispered in the darkness, his hand stroking her hair as she lay against his chest. "I love you too." She pressed a kiss over his heart. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself, Lydia. I just provided the legal paperwork." He pulled her closer. "But I'm very glad I was there to help." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. Lucas kept his practice in San Francisco but spent most of his time in Skidoo handling cases throughout the territory. He converted one of the rooms in the boarding house into an office, and word spread quickly that there was an honest lawyer in Skidoo who would fight for justice regardless of a client's ability to pay. Lydia continued running the boarding house, though now she had help. Lucas insisted on hiring a woman from town to assist with the cooking and cleaning, giving Lydia more time to work on expanding the business. She began offering full meals to the public, not just boarders, and the dining room quickly became the most popular eating establishment in Skidoo. Tom, Jack, and Henry remained as permanent residents, forming an unlikely family around the young couple. When Lydia discovered she was expecting a baby the following spring, all three men were as excited as if they were going to be grandfathers. "What do you hope for?" Lucas asked one night, his hand resting on her gently swelling belly. "A boy or a girl?" "I do not care, as long as the baby is healthy." Lydia covered his hand with hers. "Though a boy might be nice, a son we could name after your father." Lucas's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "He would have liked that. He would have liked you. Tell me about him." So Lucas talked about his father, about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about the dreams his family had before they lost everything. Lydia listened and understood better why fighting for justice meant so much to him. He was not just fighting for her or for his clients. He was fighting for his mother, for the home she had lost, for the life they could have had. Their son was born on a cool October evening, delivered by the town doctor with Tom, Jack, and Henry pacing anxiously downstairs. He had Lucas's dark hair and Lydia's green eyes, and they named him James Matthew Ortega. Lucas held his son with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect." "He is," Lydia agreed, exhausted but happy. "Our perfect little boy." As James grew, the boarding house filled with the sounds of childhood, laughter and crying, and the patter of small feet on wooden floors. Lucas proved to be a devoted father, spending every moment he could with his son, teaching him to ride and rope and read. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, Hannah Rose, with her father's gray-blue eyes and a temperament as fierce as her mother's. And 2 years after that, another son, Samuel Daniel, who looked like a perfect blend of both parents. The boarding house had to be expanded to accommodate their growing family. Lucas and Tom led the construction, adding a new wing with private family quarters and a larger kitchen. Henry brought supplies at cost, and Jack carved beautiful details into the woodwork. "This is not how I imagined my life turning out," Lydia said one evening, watching her children play in the yard while Lucas worked on legal briefs at the kitchen table. "When my father died and left me alone, I thought I would spend the rest of my life running this boarding house by myself, never having a family of my own." Lucas set down his pen and pulled her into his lap. "And this is better? This is everything." She kissed him softly. "You gave me everything, Lucas." "No, my love, we gave each other everything." He rested his forehead against hers. "I was just a lawyer traveling through town. You were the one who made me want to stay." News reached them occasionally about Marcus Henley. He died in prison after serving only 5 years of his sentence, and neither Lucas nor Lydia felt any sadness at the news. The women he had victimized received restitution from his seized assets, though no amount of money could fully compensate for what they had lost. Lucas's legal practice thrived, with clients coming from all over California and the Nevada territories. He became known as the lawyer who would take on powerful interests and win, and he never forgot his original mission: protecting those who could not protect themselves. Lydia's boarding house became a landmark in Skidoo, known for excellent food, clean rooms, and the warmth of its proprietors. She hired several women from town to help run the establishment, giving them opportunities for employment and independence they might not otherwise have had. Tom, Jack, and Henry became honorary uncles to the Ortega children, spoiling them shamelessly and teaching them everything from mining to cooking to the value of hard work and loyalty. When Tom finally decided to retire from prospecting, Lucas helped him file proper claims that ensured his financial security for the rest of his life. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas took Lydia on a trip to San Francisco, their first time away from the children for more than a day. They stayed in a grand hotel, attended the opera, and walked along the waterfront. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asked, as they stood watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. "Giving up your practice here to spend most of your time in a tiny desert town?" Lucas wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Not for one single moment. San Francisco has opportunities, certainly, but Skidoo has you. It has our children. It has our life together. That is worth more than all the opportunities in the world." Lydia turned in his arms to face him. At 33, Lucas was even more handsome than when she had first met him, his face weathered by sun and time, but his eyes still bright with intelligence and love. "I am glad you came to Skidoo that day." "So am I. Though I have to admit, when I rode into town, I was not expecting to meet the love of my life." "What were you expecting?" "A simple mining claim dispute, a few days of work, then back to San Francisco." He cupped her face gently. "Instead, I found a brave woman being threatened by a corrupt banker, and I knew I could not ride away. My mother would never have forgiven me." "Your mother would be proud of you," Lydia said softly, "proud of the man you became, the work you do, the family you have built." "I hope so." Lucas kissed her forehead. "I wish she could have met you and the children. She would have loved you." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Lydia thought about the terrified woman she had been 10 years ago, alone and facing eviction based on laws that did not exist. She thought about the cowboy lawyer who had brought real law to her defense, who had fought for her when no one else would. And she thought about everything that had come after: the love, the marriage, the children, the life they had built together from nothing but determination and hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For everything. For fighting for me, for loving me, for giving me this life." Lucas pulled her closer. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger who showed up on your doorstep with nothing but good intentions and legal knowledge. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Lucas corrected with a smile. "The best decision you made was saying yes when I proposed." Lydia laughed. "You are probably right about that." They returned to Skidoo the following week, to their children and their home and their life. The boarding house was bustling as always, full of miners and travelers and the constant activity of a successful business. But now there was also the laughter of children, the warmth of family, and the security of knowing they were building something lasting. Years continued to pass. James grew into a serious young man who studied law like his father, determined to carry on the family tradition of fighting for justice. Hannah became a teacher, opening a school in Skidoo that served not just the mining families but also the Native American children from nearby reservations. Samuel showed an aptitude for business, helping his mother run the boarding house and eventually taking over its day-to-day operations. Lucas and Lydia grew older together, their hair graying, their faces lined with years of laughter and hard work, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experiences and the life they had built. On their 25th anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the extended family of friends who had supported them through everything, Lucas stood and raised his glass. 25 years ago, I rode into Skidoo expecting to handle a simple legal matter. Instead, I found the most extraordinary woman I have ever known, a woman who was being evicted based on laws that did not exist. I brought real law to her defense, but she brought something far more valuable to mine: love, family, and a reason to believe that justice actually matters. He turned to Lydia, his eyes as full of love as the day they married. "You have given me everything, my darling, a home, children, a life of meaning and purpose. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Lydia stood and took his hand, tears streaming down her face. "And I love you, Lucas Ortega, with every beat of my heart. You came into my life when I needed you most, and you have never left my side. You are my hero, my partner, my greatest love." They kissed to cheers and applause, and Lydia thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment, about the fake eviction notice that had threatened to destroy her life, about the cowboy lawyer who had defended her not just with legal knowledge but with courage and conviction, about how one act of kindness, one decision to help a stranger in need had transformed both their lives forever. That night, lying in bed in the quiet darkness, Lucas held Lydia close and said, "Do you know what the best part of our story is?" "What?" "That it is not over yet. We still have so many years ahead of us, so many more memories to make." Lydia smiled and kissed him softly. "Then I cannot wait to see what happens next." And indeed, they had many more years together, watching their children grow and thrive, welcoming grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. Lucas continued practicing law well into his 70s, and Lydia remained actively involved in the boarding house until her 80s. When Lucas finally passed away at 82, peacefully in his sleep with Lydia beside him, the entire town of Skidoo mourned. He was remembered as a champion of justice, a devoted husband and father, and a man who had made a real difference in countless lives. Lydia lived another 5 years, surrounded by family and filled with memories of their life together. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch of the boarding house they had built together and remember the day a tall cowboy lawyer had ridden into her life and changed everything. She remembered his gray-blue eyes and the way he had looked at her with respect and admiration. She remembered how he had fought for her when no one else would. She remembered their first kiss, their wedding day, the births of their children, and the thousands of small moments that had made up their life together. And she remembered most of all the love they had shared, a love that had started in the midst of chaos and injustice but had grown into something beautiful and lasting. When Lydia passed away surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words were about Lucas. "I am coming, my love," she whispered. "Wait for me." They were buried side by side in the Skidoo cemetery, overlooking the desert mountains they had both loved. Their headstone read simply, "Lucas and Lydia Ortega. They brought law and love to the wild frontier. Together forever." The boarding house remained in the family for generations, a testament to the woman who had built it and the man who had helped her keep it. And in Skidoo, the story of Lydia and Lucas became legend, passed down through the years as an example of true love, real justice, and the difference one person can make when they choose to stand up for what is right. Their great-great-granddaughter would eventually write their story, documenting the fake eviction notice, the corrupt banker, and the cowboy lawyer who had brought real law to defend an innocent woman. The book would be titled "Justice in the Desert: How Love and Law Saved a Woman's Home," and it would inspire countless others to fight for what was right, no matter the odds. But the real legacy of Lucas and Lydia Ortega was not in books or stories. It was in the family they created, the people they helped, and the love they shared for over half a century. It was in the lives they touched, and the example they set of what marriage and partnership could be at its very best. In the end, their story was simple: a woman in trouble, a man willing to help, and a love that transformed both their lives. It was a story as old as time, but also uniquely theirs, played out against the harsh beauty of the California desert in the dying days of the Old West. And it was a story with the happiest of endings because they had found each other, built a life together, and loved each other until their very last days. What more could anyone ask for than that?